Hello and welcome to Words Matter. I'm David Rothkopf. I'm your co-host, the shy, demure one on this show,
Hmm.
joined by the outspoken, eloquent, and pretty much always right, Norm Ornstein. How are you doing, Norm?
I'm feeling a little bit better right now, David, for this reason. Today, Trump called for the death of Democrats in Congress, but he didn't call for the death of you or me. So you could say almost literally today we've dodged a bullet.
Well, obscurity has its benefits, Norm. it's the uh,
But
it's
I
the
want to say to all of our listeners, obscurity has its benefits, but that doesn't mean you should subscribe and spread the word.
well,
We'll
that's
take
right. We're only obscure to those who resist informed perspectives like our president.
Yeah.
But I don't, I'm literally, as we're doing this podcast, I've just been writing a column on what you were talking about there. And I hope to finish it when we're done, but it'd probably be better because I'll get to talk to you about it. And, Trump has done this before. He called for Mark Milley to be put to death when Milley was saying things that he was uncomfortable with. Um, but this deserves a little bit more explication. On the one hand, what were these people calling for? They were calling for uh, they were all military veterans or CIA veterans, and they were calling for those in the military to, and here was their shocking transgression, to uh, uphold the Constitution. That was their
Well,
offense.
that's Trump's definition of treason.
Well, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But it's something about it resonated with me. And let me put it to you that for the past 2 days, Donald Trump has been welcoming here in Washington a man who we know put his political enemies to death. And today he said, hey, let's put my political enemies to death. What's more, Trump, as his political fortunes fade, and they are fading fast, um, he's become more and more odious. Last week we thought we would never hear anything quite as bad as when he said to a reporter, "Quiet, piggy." And then, on Tuesday, we never thought we'd hear anything as bad as him actually defending the murderers of Jamal Khashoggi and saying that Khashoggi was not well liked, like he brought it on himself. And then chillingly, like the fucking Godfather, he was like, things happen. I mean, you could hear Tony Soprano saying it. Well, I'm sorry, things happen. And so it seems like he's in the middle of a descent into a very dark place.
We feared this, that the more his political fortunes decline, the more he will double down on odious behavior. And of course, it doesn't get much more odious than calling for the death of your political opponents. And we know that there are unhinged people out there, or even people who, under other circumstances, might be hinged, but hear from their cult leader that it's time to murder the traitors. Um, but we also know that he says almost every day, there's the Insurrection Act. And uh, I'm fearing, but expecting that if it really looks going into next year like Democrats are just going to sweep in these elections and his political fortunes and those of his party are deteriorating rapidly. Uh, and I suspect what may very well happen, this is something we can get into more. We've talked about it a little bit. But if he goes ahead with his plan in May to purge the Federal Reserve of its sane people and replace them with clowns and idiots, the global economy and the American economy are going to go into a tailspin. And can we possibly put it past him to invoke the Insurrection Act and declare martial law? No, it is well within his wheelhouse.
Well,
So
he's already trying to have his opponents rounded up, right? I mean, he's using the law, but in a very sort of sloppy and ineffective way thus far to go after his opponents. And as you say, if it looks bad for him, he's likely to get worse. Well, there was a poll out just yesterday, I think, that seemed to indicate that the Democrats were up in a generic competition with Republicans, and I think this was Gallup. It was a fairly reputable poll by like 15 points, which I don't know. I don't recall ever having seen anything like that. I know that I spoke to a Democrat on the Hill last week, and he said if we're up 8 points, we'll win 35 seats. So I mean, this is big, right? I mean, it's potentially very big. And it's just one of the indicators. You mentioned the fate of the economy, the other things, which just suggest desperation may be Trump's only option.
well, there is another option, which is to understand that the people have turned against you and to react by trying either to improve your policies or change the way you refer to people. But that, of course, is not even an option for him. That we could consider this one poll possibly an outlier, but what we know is that the average of reputable polls has the Democrats in this generic ballot. Would you vote for a Democrat or a Republican? Up by somewhere between 8 and 10 at the moment, which would be huge. And it would also put the Senate in play. And I should mention one other possibility that I do not rule out, which is John Thune, if it looks like they could lose the Senate, basically blowing up the filibuster in order to pass a draconian voter law, which would ban most early voting, ban most vote by mail, and require a completely onerous voter ID. And Congress can do this nationwide for federal elections. The Constitution says it plainly that the states regulate, but Congress can supersede them and regulate the time, manner, and place of elections. So, behavior that's completely outside the norms of our system, designed solely to keep in power a party that has lost its public support, is not just on Trump. It's also very much in the possible wheelhouse of those we once considered sane and reasonable, if conservative, like John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader from South Dakota.
Yeah, remember a couple of weeks ago? Remember when the Charlie Kirk story was the big story?
Yeah.
What was that, like 10 years ago? I don't know. It seems like a long time ago, right? But there was this thing the Republicans were saying, which is there is a atmosphere of political violence in the United States, and the Democrats are responsible for it. Well, the president just called for these people to be killed, and as you pointed out, you know, what wacko out there is going to say, "Oh, he was speaking to me," through the TV set. I mean, it's it, there is an atmosphere of violence out there. Most of the violence comes from the extreme right, as we know, and this is only going to turn up the heat. And he could do that too. He doesn't. It's not just the elections. The reason he's pardoned all these people. I mean, part of the attack on these members of Congress, which was outrageous on multiple levels, was that Trump said they were guilty of sedition, which, by the way, he is guilty of, right? He is the one who seditiously led an uprising against the United States government. That is actually sedition. But if he doesn't think he can achieve his goal within the system, he has proven time and time again he's perfectly willing to try to achieve it outside of the system. And he's sort of built up this army of thugs that he thinks he can call upon.
So there are 2 points to make about that. Stuart Rhodes, the head of the Oath Keepers, who was convicted of seditious conspiracy and sentenced to a long prison term, and then pardoned by Trump, along with all the other seditious conspirators and other thugs and hoodlums, said the other day, we're waiting to be called upon, and we're eager to go. And we want to reconstitute the Oath Keepers and the other violent groups. The second is he already has his mob. That's ICE. And every day you see utterly outrageous and lawless acts perpetrated by ICE, in some cases being set down by the courts. But, pick one example. A woman shot 5 times in Chicago, claimed by the ICE people who did it that she'd pulled a gun on them and that she had first rammed their car. Video evidence showed, one, that they rammed her car, that she had no weapon. She was jailed after being shot and hospitalized, and just now released without charge. I hope she sues the shit out of these people and that we get the names of those who did it. But these kinds of things are a daily occurrence. We saw yesterday one of these thugs, an American citizen, with an AR-15 pointed at a car with the child in the car, then breaking the window, dragging the woman out while the kid was still in the car. We know that American citizens are being picked up all the time. Is it out of the realm of possibility that these people in ICE and the Border Patrol, now they're adding large numbers, and many of them probably are Oath Keepers and the other outrageous groups, being used by Trump not just to round up those who look Hispanic, but Democrats and others who have opposed him? Of course not. And we are in a realm that actually makes Orban's Hungary look like an Eden by comparison. And it is shocking. And, we should note, David, you mentioned the reference to a journalist as Piggy. And then the next day, in that joint meeting with MBS, telling the ABC reporter that she's scum, that the network is scum, and that they ought to have their license taken away. And I've got the guy at the FCC to do it. And in both of those instances, there was no pushback from the other members of the White House press corps. We've had a few of them. Peter Baker, very good White House reporter, put on social media that it was outrageous what happened to his colleague from ABC. But did any of them say, I am Spartacus? Did any of them try to repeat that question?
They never do.
They never do. And that's why Trump says, kill my opposition. And what do we get from the press corps? Bucket.
Well, okay, let me go back to that moment in a different way. When Trump said what I think ends up being the Trump doctrine, which is things happen, with this John Gotti-like statement that we can do what we want to do, it's not just Jamal Khashoggi. It's also blowing up people in boats in the Caribbean without any justification, against international law, with no evidence, and saying because we are in a crisis against, which he is characterizing as a war with narco terrorists, which is not clear what that is, but it's a little bit like Antifa. What he's trying to do is he's trying to say all the brown people out there are potentially a threat to us on a military basis as narco-terrorists. All the opponents that I have here politically are a threat to us as political terrorists, as Antifa, and I can use whatever means I want to. And so what it says is what's going on with ICE, with people who are suspected of being illegal immigrants, which actually means they look brown, can that kind of behavior can be ratcheted up, and things can happen. If you say, he's talked about using troops in Venezuela, or using troops in Mexico. Recently, he's talked about it. Well, you could also say, well, this truck that was driving up I-95 was filled with narco terrorists. We had to bring a Black Hawk helicopter in and blow up who was ever in the truck. And it's a war. We don't have to go and give you our evidence, or our evidence is all secret. It's top secret information, and we can't reveal it because to reveal it would reveal our sources and methods. But the point is, this slippery slope can get a lot worse than banning mail-in balloting.
And let's put some of the blame where it belongs. John Roberts, Sam Alito, Clarence Thomas, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett. First, they unleashed him with the immunity decision. Second, in so many other areas, maybe tariffs will be different. They've said he's got the power to declare when there's an emergency or not an emergency. And they have given him a green light. And you put that together with the way he's using the pardon power. And we know a lot of reports suggest that the people in the military who are being told to blow these boats to smithereens, many of whom understand that it's probably illegal and that they're committing murder and have expressed some unease, are being told not to worry, you will never be punished for this. And that's when we knew that the immunity decision, which gave him immunity from official acts, was combined with a pardon power where he could say to others, including SEAL Team 6, kill my opponents, that I'll pardon you, not to worry. So we've got a real problem on our hands. And if it gets worse, there will be blood all over the hands and the rest of the body and the robes of many Supreme Court justices, starting with John Roberts.
Yeah, and I might add, let's not let your friends in the Senate off the hook who jammed through all these people in ways that were completely contrary to the processes of the Senate. Now, here we are. We're 20 minutes into our conversation almost, and we haven't mentioned Epstein. And part of the issue here with what we might call the darkening, the decline, the descent of Donald Trump into his worst self is the pressure from the Epstein case. And even though I think there are 100 ways that the administration will actually hide, destroy evidence, obstruct, and that we'll never see the full evidence from them, because of the way this is unfolded, with the Congress doing this unprecedented thing, it was effectively unanimously, with one exception, supporting the release of these documents. When they fiddle the documents, what's going to happen, we know because we've heard it this week, is that somebody, Marjorie Taylor Greene or Thomas Massie or Ro Khanna or somebody, all of them, are going to stand up on the floor of the House and they're going to say, we have spoken with the survivors. Here are the names. Here are the names of the people who did these horrible things. And because of the debate clause, they're able to say these things without being accused of, in a court of law, and it's going to get darker. And Trump says, well, there were Democrats, and all the Democrats I know say, so what? And Chris Murphy literally said, so what today? It's like, if Bill Clinton's on this list, if Larry Summers is on this list, if Democrat X or Y or Z is on this list, Democrats want them to be held to account. Democrats don't view this as partisan. But it is another vector of pressure on Trump.
So let's talk about a couple of things. First, I can't let this go by without noting that the one member of the House who voted against release of these files, Clay Higgins, was met outside the Capitol by a young man saying, why did you vote against? And Higgins' response was to manhandle this young man, grab him, push him, put him in a bear hug, push him outside the scrum of reporters and others who were there. It was physical assault. These people inside Congress, we have a group who are simply thugs, and Clay Higgins is near the top of that list. So we've got that. We also know that all of this stuff that's going on is a reaction in part to Trump trying to deflect attention. I have little doubt that he knows the consequences of calling for the death of his opponents, but he's doing it now because he wants other stories. And he doesn't care if they're negative about him to push some of the attention away from Epstein. And with our conversation, to some degree, he succeeded on that front. But we also know that even though the law now, with some loopholes, says that they have to release these documents, the Justice Department, within 30 days, there will be selective release. They will first release the stuff with the names of prominent Democrats involved. And they're going to try and do everything they can to scrub Trump's name out of this. And when I saw Todd Blanche, the deputy attorney general, at a press conference with Pam Bondi, the attorney general, saying, we're going to protect the victims, he had one victim in mind, what they consider to be the victim, Donald Trump. So are we ever going to get full access to all of these documents and everything else, the other evidence, which includes, by the way, probably really damning video evidence taken from the hidden cameras at Epstein's mansion? You got to be doubtful that all of that will happen. But every day that Epstein is a major story is a really bad day for Donald Trump. And so he's trying to make it a secondary or tertiary story by doing horrible things beyond whatever he did with these young women. And let's not forget, while he has not been convicted of any crimes related to Epstein, we had a girl, 13 years old, who said with credibility that Donald Trump raped her. So we're dealing with something pretty vile here. And there are reasons why he's been desperate to keep this stuff from getting out, and why agreeing to this congressional resolution was a ruse, a feint, a ploy, not a genuine effort to get the information out.
Yeah, as it all is, as it has been from the beginning, because he tries to hide these things. The what has changed, and I think this is could not be more central for the there was a moment in 2015 in which people flipped a switch. I don't remember the day, but there was one day where the day before people would go, there's no way Donald Trump will become president of the United States. And then the day after, he appeared to have some political traction, and people said, oh my God, we have to take this seriously. What if he wins, right? And from that moment through last week, through election day of this year, Donald Trump has had enough political clout that people in the GOP have fallen into line, including people like Mitch McConnell, who hate Donald Trump. But they've just said, well, we've got to go along with this. And so Trump has, and the court, as you say, has played into it. They've given him impunity and immunity and the ability to go and be his worst possible self. And the Republican Party would uniformly line up and say, it's not so bad. Now, because he got his clock cleaned in the last election, because of Epstein, because he's getting older, and I really think the fact that he is a lame duck, he's the lamest lame duck we've seen. The defenses that he has built up are crumbling, and he is feeling worse. And I think this drives the whole thing, because one thing we've never seen, even when he was being impeached twice, we knew the Senate would let him off the hook. Is Donald Trump cornered, knowing that not only might he become, lose some elections, but he's going to become irrelevant, impotent to protect himself, open to all sorts of other kinds of attacks. It seems to me, could be wrong, but it seems to me we're at a pivotal moment in the Trump story where he's realizing his political mortality.
Yeah, and a handful of Republicans in the House started by defying him on the release of the Epstein files. That was unusual. And it says that they no longer see him as being so potent for their own constituents that they have to just go along. The moral cowards, I can't say grew any vestiges of a spine, but realized that there was no longer the same price to pay. That may continue. But I have to say, David, I will still be very surprised if any of these Republicans go out of their way to condemn Trump for calling for the death of his opponents. And they are not in a position to defy him when it comes to the way in which he is behaving, or very likely whatever power he continues to exercise. When these Democrats called on the members of the military simply to follow their oath and obey lawful orders, did any Republicans in Congress step up and say, you're absolutely right, they should not be doing illegal, unconstitutional, or immoral things? No, they all fell into line saying Democrats are calling for the military to rise up. So I'm not yet at a point where I believe that we have anything close to the check and balance as he descends and as his standing among Republicans descends, that they'll be willing to defy him or try and put some limits on him until it's too late. So we have to be vigilant and we have to be afraid of what this monster will do. Now, having said that, I think you hit on another point. He's looking old. He is looking much older. The stress seems clearly to be getting to him. I think at some level he understands that he is not in a good place and that it could get significantly worse for him. And, you know, the fact that he went for multiple physicals when they're supposed to be once a year, that he had an MRI, which you get if there's something seriously wrong or if you're worried about something seriously wrong. And he basically said, I'm a genius. I aced my MRI, even though I don't know what it was for or what they were targeting. That says to me that there are some health issues here. And, you know, he may end up incapacitated before long.
I think that's right. I think he might end up incapacitated before long. I do think it raises an interesting question, which nobody wants to talk about, which is, what would happen if J.D. Vance had to be the acting president? What would that look like? Would he be as insane as he could be? Because he seems to be willing to embrace insanity. Would he take things in a different direction? Because, we've this has happened frequently in our history. So we can't sort of rule it out.
We cannot. And what I would fear with Vance, you're not getting somebody who's going to have, even if it's a bizarre charisma, the charismatic hold that Donald Trump had as the cult leader. At the same time, Vance will keep the same team of people around him. He will still be listening to Stephen Miller, Tom Homan, and Kash Patel and
Peter
Thiel more than anybody else. And I don't think he has a moral bone in his body at this point. So I wouldn't fear him as much as Trump, but I wouldn't put any awful action or ploy past him.
Yeah, but I think, it gets to one other thing. Maybe this can be our last point here, but we've speculated on some things that could happen in 2026, right? The economy could get worse. It's likely going to get worse. The political mood for the president could get worse for the Republicans, which could bode ill for the elections. Trump could take a whole variety of actions that may or may not affect the election, or Republicans could do that. Those are all speculative. Trump getting older, that's not speculative. He's going to get older. Trump being increasingly a lame duck, that's just going to happen. At some point, starting January 1st, it's already starting, but it just, we know how this works. Donald Trump, there are going to be stories. Oh, it's J.D. Vance. Oh, it's Marco Rubio. Oh, it's Don Jr. Oh, Kristi Noem is planning. Oh, Marjorie Taylor Greene is planning. They're going to start being stories of Trump opponents or successors within the GOP that are going to drive him absolutely batshit. And there is no, there. I mean, everything else we've talked about, I think, is likely enough to happen that we should talk about it. This is inevitable. There is no way around this. He can't put a lid on it.
And the distance to batshit is very, very short. He doesn't even need to be driven there. We're talking a step or two. So
yeah, but it's true. But you've watched a lot of elections. To run for president of the United States today, you have to raise over $1 billion. It doesn't just happen. It doesn't automatically go to you just because you're the Republican, which means people have got to start raising it. 2 years is not enough because actually it's not 2 years, because it's May of 2028 where the candidate's going to be chosen, which means, a year before that is May of 2027 when this thing is really going to be engaged. And we started having debates, that far out. And May of 2027, well, that's a year and a half from now. I just, if.
Yeah, I mean, all of that presumes that we'll still have a 2026 election and that we won't all be dead by then. But that is absolutely true if we reach that point. And it's interesting because we already have one hat in the ring, more or less. Raphael, Ted Cruz, is already out there indicating that he is going to run for president. And you got to believe, just as you said, once these people decide they're going to run, and with Cruz out there, you're going to start to have Marco Rubio eyeing him sideways, and you're going to have Vance doing the same thing, and all these other pretenders. And you're not going to do it just by saying, I'm going to be the next Trump, if his standing continues to decline. So the more you have opposition within, the more you have people getting a little bit of distance from you, indicating that they'll dump you if it looks like it'll satisfy their own ambitions, the more they attack each other, the tougher it'll be for Trump, the better it will be more generally.
This is like Thanksgiving next week. We're supposed to be like in the holiday spirit. 2026 looks like a shit show to me because I talked to you.
Yeah, that's.
I could be optimistic and think, I don't know, that the Dodgers will win their third pennant or something like that. But I'm not feeling good right now, having talked to you, Norm. Give me something to be. Give me
one word. Xanax.
I was going to say, give me something to be thankful for. We'll have to do next week. We have to promise. We're going to promise that we'll do a show next week, some point, probably not on Thursday. We'll do a show, and we're just going to focus on things to be thankful for.
Good idea. Absolutely. I'm all for that.
Yeah, but you better start working now, because I don't believe you're going to come up with anything.
No. Now, the other thing you may want to try, because RFK Jr. said that he was just terrible in school. His grades were awful until he started taking heroin. Yeah, and heroin saved him. And, I was thinking, well, obviously he must be going back on heroin at this point.
Yeah, I shouldn't do this because it's unfair as we get to the end of the podcast. But I want to direct everybody on that point to Norm's Substack, because he did a really, really first-rate Substack on healthcare issues. And I got to say, we've just talked about stuff for 35 minutes, but people getting, kicked off of healthcare, people getting their premiums increased 3, 4, 5 times or more is going to drive a lot of the politics of next year. And the Republicans have no ideas about how to fix it. And you wrote a great Substack about this. And if you want to give them 60 seconds to make them go read it.
So this is basically the genesis of the Affordable Care Act, which took every Republican idea that had been created by this excellent conservative economist, Stuart Butler, and through the Heritage Foundation and into Romney Care, and adapted it to create the Affordable Care Act, which was designed to build broad bipartisan support until Mitch McConnell put the kibosh on it. And now what Republicans, because they have no other ideas, have come up with is their ages-old scam, which is promoting sham inexpensive plans that cost very little but are worthless, because as soon as you go to make a claim for anything significant, it'll be denied. Denied because they bring back pre-existing conditions. So if you had an ear infection and you didn't declare it right at the beginning, sorry, you don't get paid. And they have lifetime and annual limits, so you'll be driven into bankruptcy if anything bad happens to you. And I just have to say, in conclusion to that, David, Bill Cassidy, a physician, senator from Louisiana, whose first line in his epitaph will be, he provided the deciding vote to make RFK Jr. The executioner of many children through his bizarre policies, came out and said, we should have these inexpensive plans because let's say you're buying shampoo and one is $1 less than the other. You buy the cheaper one, you're better off, and then the others will have to adjust their prices. And my reaction to that was, yeah, buy the cheaper one. Your hair will fall out. That's what, and look at us. You can see what happens.
Well, excuse me, I have plenty of hair.
You have a lot more than I do.
I resent what you're saying there. But I do think you're right. And if you want further proof of this, folks, as soon as we log off here, go to the CDC website, where as of today, it says, it is possible that vaccines cause autism. It's not possible, by the way. It's a complete lie.
Yeah.
But it's now the U.S. government, because RFK Jr., the heroin addict with the brain worm, is running the place, is embracing. I hate it when people call it pseudoscience. These are just lies. These are crazy conspiracy theories and lies.
Yeah, that cause death.
And it's going to cause death because there are going to be millions of Americans who don't like to get a needle or don't like to go to the doctor, who don't have the money, are going to say, I'm not going to do this. And people will die. Not lots and lots of people will die. How do we know? Because before the vaccines, lots and lots of people died.
Yeah. And after the vaccines, they didn't.
They didn't. And like, oh, yeah, put two and two. You crazy Democrat. All right. Thank you very much, Norm. Thank you, everybody, for listening. There's more out there from us and everything else we're doing. If you like it, go to the DSR Network, click on membership, support us, a few bucks a month. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, at least, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hope that grow. We appreciate whatever support you can give. We are thankful for you. And next week, we'll be back with an entire show full of things to be thankful for. So, while you're putting the turkey into the oven and you're like saying, how do I lift my spirits? Because crazy old Aunt Gladys is coming over. We will fix that. We will give you something positive to think about next week. Until then, thanks, Norm. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
David.